Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahawashi, Bahasham, Barakahakodash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahawashi. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who rule and teach well. And peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video, and I'm going to start it off in Mark chapter 3, verses 24 to 25. And if a kingdom be divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And hey, that's a very true statement. Just look at what happened to the nation of Israel when it broke into the southern and the northern kingdom. We eventually fell down, and it's no different with the kingdom of these Edomites, or so-called white people today, especially in the United States of America. They're clearly divided on every level you can think about right now. And what it's ultimately going to culminate into is a second civil war. Average Joe Edomites against average Joe Edomites, class warfare, warfare against the government, states against states, you name it. And I opened up the video with this verse to preface an article from RT.com titled, "Trump Voters Favor Secession for the States. Poll Says." Backers of the former president believe they'd be better off if GOP-led states split from the U.S., a Yahoo.YouGov survey has shown. So again, we can clearly see that this kingdom of the United States of America is divided. And as it said back in Mark chapter 3, verse 24, that kingdom cannot stand. We're living in the last seconds, the twilight hours of the United States of America, which is also biblically known as Babylon the Great, spiritual Sodom in Egypt, as pursuant to Revelation 11, verse 8, and spiritual Assyria in the scriptures. And the United States of America is going to completely fall when it's hit by 200 million nuclear missiles from not only its enemies like Russia, China, or Iran, but also its European allies who are going to turn against her at some point during World War III to ally themselves with America's enemies to shoot those nuclear missiles onto her. And it's going to turn the United States of America into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea, and then a desolate, uninhabitable wasteland afterwards. And the fact that you've got these Russian Edomites against these American Edomites, and America's own European Edomites against her, and will eventually completely turning against her as well, further shows that this kingdom of Esau Edom globally is divided, and it will fall globally. And the next kingdom to come, which will never be divided, is going to be the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of Israel, under the true children of Israel, who are known today as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. And the elect of the nation of Israel is coming back to their power, Yahweh Bahashem Yahawashi. The kingdom amongst the beginning with the elect is no longer being divided, so eventually it will never fall when it's fully established. But verse 25, "And if a house be divided against itself, that house cannot stand." And the house of Esau Edom is clearly divided. Like I said earlier, just look in the United States of America. These Edomites are divided at damn near every level. Conservative against liberal, red versus blue, Republican against Democrat, all the same thing. The Edomite man against the Edomite woman with MGTOW versus feminism. Pro-life Edomites against pro-choice Edomites. A generational divide with the Generation Z and the millennials against the boomers. You've got so-called straight Edomites against Edomites in the alphabet group beginning with LG. So-called religious Edomites against atheistic Edomites, class warfare with rich versus poor, and then the average Joe Edomite against the Edomites in the government. But now let's get into this article on RT.com. Many residents of Republican-controlled states who voted for Donald Trump in 2020 believe they would be better off if their state seceded from the U.S., a new poll has revealed. Let's look at this picture real quick. A Edomite against Edomite. House divided cannot stand. About 33% of Trump voters in so-called red states say they'd personally fare better if their state became an independent country, according to a Yahoo/YouGov poll released on Friday. That compares with 29% who believe they'd be worse off after secession. The remaining 38% are either unsure or see themselves faring about the same in a newly independent state. And a couple of weeks ago, I did another video where they did another poll showing that 42% of Americans believe that a second civil war is on the horizon. And within that article, it was also talking about how you're having a growing number of Americans believe that using political violence against people in the government who are not for the interests of America or democracy is justified, which also plays into the scriptures, which we're going to get a little bit later. The margin was similar when Americans were asked how their state as a whole would fare after secession, with 35% of Trump voters speculating it would be better off versus 30% saying that it would be worse off. The poll is the latest illustration of increasing political polarization and cultural division in American life. Half of Americans believe there will be another U.S. Civil War in their lifetime, and that the country will cease to be a democracy at some point. It will cease to be a country at all in the foreseeable future when those 200 million nuclear missiles hit this place. An earlier Yahoo.YouGov poll showed in June. This is Isaiah chapter 19, verse 2. And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians. And this isn't talking about the ancient Egyptians who were Hamites or so-called Africans. More specifically, Mizraim. This is talking about the modern-day spiritual Egyptians, as pursuant to Revelation 11, verse 8, these American Edomites. And they shall fight, everyone against his brother, and everyone against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. And if a kingdom be divided, it cannot stand. And this civil war is going to be bloody. Guns will be used, and blood will flow through the streets. The Most High put a lot of you Edomites in a trick bag during those George Floyd protests back in 2020, where a lot of you were scared and became first-time gun owners. And he's getting y'all ready to use those guns on your Edomite brothers during the Second American Civil War. The divide grew even deeper with last month's U.S. Supreme Court ruling that deletion of babies because of the YouTube algorithms isn't a protected constitutional right, leaving the hotly contested issue for state lawmakers to decide. About half of states have either banned deletion of babies already or are expected to place new restrictions on the procedure within the next several weeks. And like I said earlier in the video, if a house be divided, that house cannot stand. These Edomites are divided on every level, especially on pro-life versus pro-choice. About 92% of red state Trump voters trust their state government more than the federal government to do what's best, the latest poll found. 8 in 10 blue state residents who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 trust their state government more than Washington. Another division, Edomites trusting their state government more than the federal government. City against city. And this also plays into 2 Esdras chapter 15. This is 2 Esdras chapter 15. I'm going to start at verse 14. Woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword in their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another. And that one people standing up and fighting against another can go into a multitude of things. One race of people standing up against another race of people. Race wars, which are also coming. Nation against nation, as Yahushua Hamashiach called it in Matthew chapter 24. And hey, one political group of people against another political group of people. Liberal Edomites against conservative Edomites. One class of people against another class. Rich versus poor. The average Joe Edomite against the Edomites in the government, etc., etc. And one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. And the modern day sword in the United States of America is the gun. Verse 16, for there shall be sedition among men, And that word sedition means conduct or speech inciting open rebellion against a ruling authority or monarch. Trump voters favor secession for their states. And invading one another, they shall not regard their kings nor princes. And your modern day kings and princes are these people in the government, like your mayors, governors, senators, presidents, prime ministers, etc., as well as the authorities such as the police or the military that uphold the system. We're coming into a time where people are not going to regard them, as it says, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. Everybody's going to do what they think's in their best interests. But this saying that they shall not regard their kings nor princes plays back into that paragraph we just read, where it says about 92% of red state Trump voters trust their state government more than the federal government. They shall not regard their kings nor princes in the federal government. And you can see it even getting to a point to where things are going to get so bad that they're going to say, fuck those in the state government as well. It's sedition among men. Just 15% of overall respondents believe the U.S. is generally headed in the right direction. Just 15%. What a very reassuring numbers, compared with 72% who say it's off on the wrong track. And these are just the numbers that Esau's saying. They're probably much worse and more divided than this. The poll showed only 27% trust that Biden is up to the challenges facing the U.S. versus 56% who say he isn't. Americans also have a grim outlook of the future, with 46% saying the next generation will be worse off and only 25% saying it will be better off. And the only thing that this generation, because Abaratazab, this is the last generation before the kingdom of heaven, which it looks like it is, since all these end times prophecies Yahushua Hamashiach told his disciples to look for are either in the process of taking place or taking place as we speak. But the only thing that this generation has to look forward to is death by nuclear fire, and the next generation of you Edomites going into slavery in the kingdom of heaven. And only 25% saying it will be better off. Similarly, 37% of voters believe America's best days are behind us, compared with 31% who say those days are still to come. That's it with this article. But hey, this is just another example to show that these Egyptians are against each other, and that this kingdom of the United States of America is divided and will fall. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope your sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. We're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom.